Morning, everyone. I want to address something that's been coming up in the comments a lot. This show is called Canada Poly. It's not Maxime Bernier Poly. It's not conservative Poly. It's Canada Poly. And the point of this show was not to highlight Mr. Bernier or Mr. Scheer or Mr. Trudeau. It was to look at Canadian politics and the biggest stories in Canadian politics as I saw fit. I get to choose the stories because it's my show. And that's the point here. So I've been catching a lot of flack from PPC supporters for covering Mr. Scheer and the commercial that happened yesterday, and for not covering Mr. Bernier enough. And for a long time, Mr. Bernier was the biggest story in Canadian politics, by a lot, by a long shot. Mr. Bernier was the most exciting thing to happen to Canadian politics for a year. Really. But this is election time, and there's a lot of big stories going on. Justin Trudeau's stories going on, CBC suing the Conservative Party, that's a big story. Them asking for that savage ad to be pulled down, that's a big story, and I'm going to cover it. And that ad was not promoting conservative, like the Conservative Party of Canada. That ad was an absolute takedown of Justin Trudeau with a little not as advertised at the end. I wasn't promoting the Conservative Party of Canada. I was merely saying that, holy cow, that ad nailed it, and it did. And I'm not going to lie because they're not my party. I don't care if they're my party. I will reach across party lines and work with people who want the best for Canada. I don't think Justin Trudeau wants the best for Canada. But I'm not going to not cover something because it's the wrong party. Sorry, that's not how I work. So if you don't like that, you're welcome to unsubscribe. And that's okay with me. It's just fine. You don't have to like me. That's okay. There's other people who do what I do, kind of, and they cover different stories, and they'll cover what you want. Or if you want to do it, do your own show, and I'll watch it, maybe. I have very limited time. But my point fundamentally is, welcome to my show. I get to choose the stories that I cover. And if you don't agree with me, that's okay. That's okay. Threatening to not watch me anymore? Well, sorry, I do this show for me. I do this show because all of this stuff rolls around in my head. And if I don't tell somebody, and lucky you, it's you. If I don't tell somebody, then it'll just come out during dinner and people will look at me strange because they won't understand the context of what I'm trying to tell them. This works. So I hope you enjoy the show. But I do the show the way I want to do the show. And it doesn't matter who I like. It matters what are the most important stories in Canadian politics. And there's a lot of them. So, yeah, I'm going to cover them. With all of that said, good morning, everyone. Here is a Maxime Bernier story, and a bunch of people sent me this article. I like this article. We're going to start off with this article. Here we go. Financial Post is reporting, quote, William Watson, Maxime Bernier wants to be seen as a conservative in a hurry. So this is an opinion piece from the Financial Post. The Financial Post has been very kind to Mr. Bernier. I think they've consistently supported him, in my opinion, and, yeah, here we go. If you're a conservative, you've probably got a checklist of things you believe. Let's see how, in his 2,273 words in Monday night's debate, Maxime Bernier stacks up. Yes, I did count. The other leaders had Scheer, 4,037 words, Trudeau, 3,824 words, Singh, 3,780 words, May, 3,446 words, and Blanchet, 2,254 words. So Mr. Bernier had the second least. The transcript record shows 2 interventions by, quote, unidentified male, but I didn't count those. Mind you, there's more to Bernier than what he said Monday night. He had a mixed record as a federal minister, great in industry, not so good in foreign affairs, where his relaxed view of document security got him canned. Forming his own party may well have been an act of personal pique, albeit well-earned pique after the Conservative leadership was snatched away from him by the dairy cartel. And his new party has attracted support from decidedly unsavory sorts. In 10 days, voters will be judging his full bio, just as they will be with the other candidates. But for now, let's look at what he did say on Tuesday. What did Bernier say? Quote, the UN is a dysfunctional organization. Few conservatives would disagree. Quote, extreme multiculturalism, ... ellipses here, right? So there's something else that the politician said between the extreme multiculturalism and the rest of this quote. This is usually done for brevity. This is usually done to get closer to what they're saying. But sometimes things get hidden. Sometimes the intention of the context of the sentence gets lost in removing some of this stuff. So just be aware when you see that, okay? Anyway, ... is not the way to build this country. Diversity is fine. It's welcome, in fact, but policies that reinforce ethnic separateness are not. It's time to have a discussion about ... immigration. Discussion should not be a problem. Our current target of 350,000 immigrants a year was not revealed by the divine. Anyone who knows anything about social science knows that, quote, optimal immigration or immigrant flows are the like are essentially incalculable. Excuse me. But then why would Bernier's target of 150,000 be best? Going for more economic immigrants and fewer family members and refugees might serve various growth and redistribution goals, but are there moral problems in stripping poor countries of their most talented people? Tough questions, but by all means, let's discuss. I want to make a point here, just in case you're not sure what I mean by this. It means basically that the movers and the shakers in third world countries, people who would be building that country, are generally taken by the immigration policies because they can make it in our Western country, right? And the problem with that is that if you take all of those types of people from all around the world, then their country won't be built, right? Because the people who are stacking up at the bottom of their hierarchy and who wouldn't be able to make it in a Western country don't get to come, right? So they don't benefit from the economic development of those people because Canada or the West is benefiting from their work. You see how that moral problem comes into play? Okay, that's just one way of looking at it. And it's a way that a lot of people aren't taught these days. It's not talked about, so that's interesting, right? Okay. Tough questions, back to the article. But by all means, let's discuss. Bernier's, quote, everybody is welcome in this country sets a good tone for the debate. Even if it's a good bet, not everyone in his party agrees. The test of his sincerity will be stamping out the bigoted fringe. I have to say, I've met a lot of people in this party. I was at the Gatineau conference. I was present during the beginning of this party. There isn't a bigoted fringe. Every single one of us wants the best for Canada. And the best for Canada means having a sustainable system that isn't bankrupting our country. Like, it has nothing to do with bigoted anything. It has everything to do with fiscal policies being responsibly executed, our systems being responsibly run properly by a federal government that has Canada as its first priority, not as its third or fourth after the UN and some other boutique ideas. Like, really, this is... Okay, back to the article. Quote, you must believe in people. You must give back their money in their own pockets. Check. Quote, Canadian values include equality before the law. That means rule of law. Equality between man and woman, of course. Quote, we need to celebrate who we are, and we're not doing that. We certainly weren't doing it during our 150th birthday guilt fest in 2017. Those aren't Bernier's words. Those are the article's words, just to be clear. To Elizabeth May, quote, we won't be able to create any wealth with your policies. You have the same kind of policies as in socialist countries like Venezuela. They won't create any wealth. Ms. May seems kind, gentle, and unrevolutionary, but she does propose a complete overhaul of the economy by a regulatory fiat. Quote, we have the right in this country to debate ideas, and that's what I'm doing. Who could disagree? Well, Jagmeet Singh, for one, whose explanation for why he thought Bernier's various tweets should have disqualified him from the debate almost directly preceded a question from a lady in BC asking, quote, how will you ensure that all voices across the political spectrum are heard and considered? By shutting them down, I guess. And yes, we have video footage of Mr. Singh shutting down Kian, asking him a question simply by virtue of the news outlet that Kian works for. And he works for Rebel News, but isn't a free press a free press? Shouldn't you answer the questions that are posed to you by the press? If you can. And if you can't, by all means, pass. But if you can answer them, shouldn't you try? Shouldn't you do your best? Maybe. Back to the article. Quote, I will respect the Constitution. I will respect provinces. I won't interfere in healthcare because it's a provincial jurisdiction. Pharmacare is a provincial jurisdiction. Mr. Singh, it's a provincial jurisdiction. Classic conservative views, these. Back to quotes. Quote, everybody here on this stage is spending more money. We want the private sector to be able to invest. The private sector works quite well. Where will you find the money? In our pockets. Amen. And quote, you're saying you're for pipelines, Mr. Scheer, but you don't have the courage to use the Constitution to be sure that we will have pipelines in this country for the unity and prosperity of our country. And he goes on to mention Section 9210 of the Constitution, which gives the federal government jurisdiction over interprovincial transportation and communication, and quote, works for the general advantage of Canada. That's John A. Macdonald conservatism. Quote, we are the only party that will try to implement property rights on reserves and establish a relationship based on self-reliance for these communities. Property rights may be a, quote, settler concept, as progressives would call it, but how many societies have delivered high standards of living without well-defined individual property rights? Quote, what I like from you, Elizabeth, you don't want any subsidies to the oil and gas industry, and I don't believe in corporate subsidies, also in corporate welfare, so we can agree on that. The cross-party committee is probably premature. I'm guessing Elizabeth May loves subsidies for wind, solar, biomass, and all sorts of other energy sources, except nuclear, that aren't viable without them. Quote, we are the only party that will balance the budget in 2 years. I promise you to do nothing except balance the budget, and after that, lower your taxes. That's the only responsible policy. Mr. Scheer and Mr. Trudeau, it's all the same. It's all boutique tax credits. That's a little harsh. Scheer cuts the first income tax rate from 15 to 13.75%, while Trudeau raises his basic personal amount for people under $147,000. But most readers of this page, and I suspect most writers on this page, will not disagree. On climate, quote, we want to do things that are possible. We want to do things that are possible to protect our health, our air, our environment, our water. I believe there's no climate emergency. It's not being clear what the true conservative position on climate is. I'll stop the quotes right there. Choice is good, but sometimes hard. Voters on Canada's right now face the same dilemma voters on its left have struggled with for decades. Votes for the Liberals, whose hearts may be way left, but who cling calculatingly to the center, where the votes are. Or vote for the Liberals in a hurry. It's not always an easy choice. Andrew Scheer is doing his best to cling to the center. Max Bernier is a conservative in a hurry. Good luck with your choice, conservatives. And yeah, I think that the only thing that I would disagree with Mr. Bernier on here is how he frames a climate emergency. I think that we do have an emergency in this country, and I think that the emergency is very clear. We've got waterways, we've got sewage, raw sewage, human feces being discharged into our waterways all across the country. And nobody is talking about this as if it's an emergency, but it is something that the Harper government was on track to have completely finished and modernized by 2020. And this is something that Justin Trudeau's government has ignored completely. And I think that you could reframe climate emergency into a water emergency. Water is much more dire. We die in 3 days if we don't have clean water. Like if we don't have drinking water for us, then we die. That's that. So this is an emergency that is not being fixed by sending money outside of our country. This is an emergency that is not being fixed by the carbon taxes being charged to people. This is an emergency that is being completely swept under the rug and inconveniently reported grudgingly by the paid off mainstream media every end of October, early November, when the discharges have to start. And watch for it soon. Montreal is going to have a news article coming in early November, and then BC will start as well. It is incredibly interesting to have a carbon tax be fully supported by a population that maybe understands that it doesn't reduce emissions, but it also doesn't fix any of the other environmental problems that were started by Stephen Harper and ignored by Justin Trudeau. So that's the only little bit. His rhetoric around climate emergency, I think we need to fix that up. So there's some free advice. And usually I give free advice to the Conservative Party. So there you go, everyone. I'm giving free advice to my own party during my show. Okay. I hope that satisfies. This one went a lot longer than normal. I have like 4 other stories to get to. The CBC is suing the Conservative Party, and I think that's huge news. Justin Trudeau was an hour and a half late and wearing a bulletproof vest last night, and I mean more and more news. But I'm going to leave it here because this is as long already as a usual old school Canada Poly show. So I am going to leave it here. I am probably going to do another video because the other stories are really important and I want to touch on them as well. So voting day is less than 10 days away. It's October 21st. Make sure you get out and vote. Voting is open right now. In my riding, it's 9:30 to 9:30, but in your riding, it might be different. I've heard 9 to 9. I've heard different stories from different ridings. So check when your voting is open, etc. And the last little bit of news before I go this morning is if you are voting at a special ballot station, you may have to write the name in fully. I called because I had some constituents worried that they were going to have to write my name in and they wanted to know why I wasn't on the ballot. I am on the ballot. There are proper ballots everywhere, but in Guelph at the main returning station, that remains a special ballot. office until a specific day, and I can't remember what the cutoff day. It might be election day. It might be a couple of days before election day, but I can't remember. Either way, all this weekend at the special ballot office, you have to write candidates' names in. Everywhere else, it's a regular ballot. Okay, that's why. I just wanted that out there. All right, well, thank you for watching, everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. Go vote.